So my name is Marcell Tessenyi. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Blue Sky Space. When I was doing my studies, I did a few additional lectures on entrepreneurship, which I thought were interesting. But then I went down the path of doing research in astrophysics, which traditionally doesn't lead to entrepreneurship at all. So I didn't expect that this would happen, but it did. What does it mean to me? I think it's basically just trying out new things, new activities, and with the support of investors, being able to afford to take risks, try out new approaches, different models, and see what works. I've started astrophysics research because I was fascinated by space exploration. As a kid, I was inspired by the science fiction movies, etc. And when I heard in my studies about the discovery of exoplanets, which are these planets orbiting faraway stars, I was hooked. I wanted to learn more about them, and when I realized that we knew very little of these, I was fascinated by that, and I started doing research at University College London in trying to understand what these planets are made of. Very quickly we realized that to do that you need more data, and to get that type of particular data you need satellites, because the Earth atmosphere itself is also the signal that we might be looking for on other planets. So you need to be above the Earth atmosphere to be able to look at other planets. So the journey of Blue Sky Space, the company we started to operate our first satellite Twinkle, was around the principle that you need to have a satellite in space to be able to do those observations. And the only way today to getting data for space science is to have a big space agency sponsor or build a mission. And that is a very complicated process, it's a very expensive process. It can take up to 20 years to get a satellite into orbit. And we decided that it might be worth trying to do a different approach to accelerate that pace, to get a satellite which is maybe faster to build, cheaper to build, and deliver science data to the global scientific community faster and more effectively. So the Twinkle Space mission was really the first project that came about in the context of Blue Sky Space. And the idea is to look at the signature that planets are leaving in light that comes from faraway stars. So what this means in practice is that when there's a distant star and there's a planet orbiting around the star, if that planet happens to go in front of that star, then part of the light from the star will go through the atmosphere of this planet. That interaction of light going through the atmosphere of the planet has an impact on what that light looks like. So there's missing information from the original light that you can observe from far away. So when you're looking at a planet which is orbiting a star that's very, very far away, you cannot really see the planet, but you can deduce it's there. And by analyzing the details of the light, you can understand what is happening on that planet itself in terms of the atmosphere. And so in technical terms, we're doing spectroscopy, so splitting the light into its constituent colors or wavelengths. And what we're doing is analyzing that spectroscopic data from a small satellite that we call Twinkle. Okay, so that's a very good question. I think that's fundamentally the critical issue with many, many companies when startups are started, is are you able to raise cash from investors? And it was not a straightforward journey at all. When we started talking to potential investors, they were intrigued by what we're doing, but the costs of building a satellite, the uncertainty of the ecosystem, the fact that currently this data is only provided by the big space agencies, in the same way as before SpaceX in the US, rockets were only built or launches were only being offered by NASA. There's a lot of people who have a lot of questions and not much certainty as to whether you'll be successful or not. But there are two things I think which are important that we managed to do. The first one is put together a team with credibility. So if you have a team with a strong pedigree that has the capabilities in principle of delivering on the vision, then that gives quite a lot of confidence to the investors. But actually what took us really over the line is that we secured funding from the European Space Agency and the UK Space Agency. And the moment we received that small amount of funding, we're talking about roughly €250,000, but that was sufficient for the investors to feel confident that, okay, the traditional ecosystem sees something in what we're doing and we're getting their backing. So that provided quite a bit of credibility and confidence to the investors to come on board. Once that started, then it's about making sure that we deliver on our objectives, building up our achievements, and making sure that we keep raising additional profile to get to the point where the satellite is launched and operational. So at the beginning of our journey, there's lots of challenges that have come up. I think fundamentally any company will be facing a multitude of challenges at the start. When you start off, unless you can succeed on any of the points, you're almost set for failure. When you start a new project and you start a new company, the chances of failure are significantly higher than the chances of success. And so what you need to do is diligently go through every single aspect of the business and make sure that everything checks out and everything makes sense. And as you're able to do that, then you go back again and you do another loop and you keep pushing the company forward slowly. And what's interesting is that you need to push forward different aspects of the company at the same time. You need to push forward funding, you need to push forward customer progress, you need to push forward technical progress. It's a bit of a game of trying to push everything forward at the same time in an ideal world. In practice, what happens is that suddenly you make huge progress on the technical aspect, but you're lagging behind on the customer, or you're lagging behind on financing. And then you have a gap, because then you need to catch up with the financing or the customers to make sure that everything is in sync. I think that's probably the hardest component of it as you develop the business at an early stage. But then, of course, every day is a set of challenges. There's always new problems and new issues. But I think the key point here is that if you've got a team that's strong enough, then you can basically address all of these and push ahead. If I was starting out now, would I do things differently? Yeah, probably everything. The reality is that with hindsight, there's lots of things where you realize that you could have been bolder on some aspects, or you should have been more cautious on others. You know, you've been putting a lot of effort and energy into, for instance, a particular grant application, and that was unsuccessful, and the one that you didn't expect was successful. So, you know, with hindsight, obviously, everything would be different. We've been exposed to a lot of other business leaders or other lectures and courses and so on. And you know, people always come to you with advice and suggestions and so on and so forth, but fundamentally every journey is individual and different. And I don't think that there's anything that's generic about running a company or starting a company that is necessarily applicable to anybody else, except for be resilient, have a team that's competent, have faith in what you're trying to do. If you believe in it, just push ahead. Other than that, every journey is so unique and so different that I think it's very difficult to have a generic statement, or even looking back in the past. Is there anything we would have done differently? For sure, but I wouldn't know even where to start. You know, if you believe in something, if you believe really hard in what you're trying to work on, then you're not going to give up, because you're going to be pushing ahead no matter what challenges and obstacles you're facing. So as long as you're doing that, that's a first good point. The second one is a team. It's very difficult at the beginning when you have an idea that you want to jealously guard it. You're worried that somebody else might steal your idea. You're worried that somebody else might do what you're doing. No, the reality is that nobody really cares about you. You have to just go ahead and trust that you can have the support of other people. If you find people who you can trust, give as much of work as you can to them, because fundamentally, even if it's your initial idea, the reality is that other people will absorb it. It will become their idea as well, and then it becomes your communal idea. And it's only by working together as a team where everyone has a sense of ownership of the problem, of the ownership of the challenge, that you can really push things ahead. So I think trust your team and make sure that you have a team that you can trust, because I think that's the key to success. So the future of Blue Sky Space, we're quite excited, we're ambitious in what we're trying to do. We started off with one single satellite, Twinkle, which is looking up into deep space. But actually what we've realized very quickly is that the scientific data is not only needed for space exploration. If you're looking at satellites that look at the Earth itself, there's a lot of scientific data that is needed in the context of climate change. And what we've seen is over the last few years, the topic of climate change has really gone up in the agenda at a global level. Obviously, people have been talking about climate change for many, many years, but in terms of high level of priority and the amount of funds and capital that's starting to be deployed towards climate change, I think we're at a pivotal moment. And it is obvious that monitoring the Earth at a global scale, being able to see things from a bird's eye, well, it's more than a bird's eye, an astronaut's eye, you really need to have a number of additional facilities in space to collect more data. Space agencies are already doing a great job in providing data out from above the Earth atmosphere, but there's always need for more data. So I think we see a future for Blue Sky Space where we're delivering high quality data to unique customer bases, which are mostly universities around the world, because science really is at the forefront of our future. Whether it is looking at climate change on the Earth, or whether it is even at the more exotic things, such as some of the billionaires who want to make humanity multiplanetary. Where would someone start when they're interested in space and astrophysics? That's a great question. I had the same challenge. When I went to study at university, I almost applied for a law degree rather than to go into physics and astronomy. And it's by pure coincidence that just before applying for my university degree, I watched a documentary about Spaceship One, which was before it was called Virgin Galactic. And a friend of mine told me that, oh yeah, you can do astrophysics if you study physics. I wasn't aware of it. I didn't even know how it works. And I looked into it, and indeed you could just apply for physics and astrophysics and go forward from there, which I did. And then from then on, of course, you get exposed to the lectures, you start meeting people, etc. So anyone who is before university, I would definitely advise study physics, because that's the starting point, probably the easiest. Engineering is the other route, by the way. It's either engineering or physics, really, if you want to go towards the space ecosystem. Now, later on in a career, or if someone decided not to study any of those two topics when it comes to university, then I think the space ecosystem is booming at the moment. I wouldn't be surprised if the job opportunities in all kinds of aspects are opening up when it comes to the space ecosystem. I always was excited and interested by technical things as a child, so definitely I was on the more geeky side of things. But I have to say that especially when I was still a student, space was a lot more traditional than it is at the moment. It was before SpaceX became really a success story, and before there is always changes in the ecosystem with more money coming in. You know, at the moment I think we're seeing a little bit of a revival of the space race of the 60s, and it's a fascinating period in the space system. When I was a student, that wasn't the case. When I was a student, it was more, you know, you can go work for the big manufacturers, or you can do research, and that's about it. It was quite limited. I think today it's a lot more exciting. I think if you really believe in your idea, if you really believe in what you're trying to do, then don't give up, push ahead, and success will come. And because of what we're doing, I'm going to say the sky is not the limit, so definitely go for it.